we cover hot topics and key issues relevant to the day-to-day business, keeping our subscribers to the annual reports continually up to date. We also put a voice and face to the words in our Invest Insights video series. Hear perspectives on the markets we cover and why they are advantageous from the people making it happen right now. And lastly, the Capital Analytics podcast, where our listeners take us on the go to stay informed of the latest business advice from those at the helm. At Capital Analytics, we know great words come from great minds, and so we bring you real insights.
Good morning, Nashville. I'm Abby Maloney, President and CEO of Capital Analytics. Welcome to the launch of our inaugural Invest Nashville 2020 report, an in-depth analysis of what makes the Middle Tennessee region tick, where opportunities are, and what challenges lie ahead. Thank you all for being here today. We're having a bit of a technological difficulty this morning. We had to change a number of computers. This happens to be the world that we're in right now. I hope you didn't hear too much feedback from the video, but now it seems that everything is okay. I'm going to continue on with my welcome speech. In doing the initial research for our report, we already knew that Nashville was world famous for its music reputation. We also knew that there was far more to the region than the Grand Ole Opry, which is why we wanted to shine a light and bring its substance into greater focus. What our interviews and analysis demonstrated was the breadth of economic activity taking place in this historic region. Yes, music and tourism are vital elements of the economy, but as our panels will demonstrate today, Nashville is also about healthcare, it's about banking and finance, and it's about smart, advanced manufacturing. In fact, Middle Tennessee is home to a diverse economy with a jobless rate that is consistently outperforming the US national average, even throughout the pandemic. Nashville's success also hasn't gone unnoticed. Businesses are arriving and also our new residents. The housing sector is booming as the population expands, driving demand for the excellent quality of life that this region offers. There are also challenges that need to be addressed. We all know very clearly now that diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important integral components for any company, and many companies are moving to ensure that they're inside the issue and not on the outside looking in. The pandemic has also disrupted supply chains, with one result being inflation that remains a huge threat on the horizon. It also created a debilitating labor shortage that we are all contending with. This is also a reason workforce development is among the region's top priorities. But when we look at the overall picture of Middle Tennessee, what we see is a great deal of optimism. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it. Today, we'll be hearing from the region's leaders who are all on the ground every day, sharing the successes and challenges over the past number of years throughout the COVID-19 pandemic experience and providing their expectations of what the future entails. At this time of change, we by now are mostly accustomed to living with COVID. It's particularly important to look ahead, learning the lessons over the past 2 years. At Capital Analytics, it is like so many other businesses, we saw the pandemic as an opportunity to change things up. Business intelligence is now more vital than ever before, whether it's in print, digital, or virtual conferences like these. First, we expanded our talented staff at Capital Analytics and have entered into 9 new markets in this post-pandemic climate: Nashville, Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Raleigh-Durham, San Antonio, Dallas, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, and North and Central Jersey, bringing our economic reporting library to just under 20 metro areas. Next, our Invest Insights platform has exploded. We will be starting season 5 in March, and over the past 4 seasons, we found that our partners, like yourselves, want to participate, want a community connection, and want to get the message out on how the world marches on. We expanded that video platform to a podcast so our readers and viewers can listen to our informative content on the go. So as you can see, the key for us, as so many of you, has been about transformation. We have quite a lineup for you today. However, before the discussions begin, I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsors for today's event. Our gold sponsors, Ascension St. Thomas and Truist, our silver sponsor, F&M Bank, our bronze sponsor, the Housing Fund, our honored sponsors, Butler Snow, DPR Construction, and the Surgical Clinic. Thank you. It is with your support that we continue to bring high-level speakers and content to the Middle Tennessee region. I would also like to recognize the team that worked tirelessly on this year's report. Shane Collins and Joey Garand, well done on this inaugural edition. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote, Courtney Pogue, the Director of Economic and Community Development for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. Courtney, can you please start your video and turn on your audio? I see him. There he is, Joey. Oh, sorry, I looked at Joey's name, but you're Courtney, obviously. Courtney, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well. Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Technologically, a little bit challenging this morning, but this is the world we live in, right?
Absolutely. We adapt to the challenges at hand.
Adapt and we make it through, onwards and upwards. I'll leave you to it, Courtney. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Well, good morning. On the behalf of Mayor John Cooper, welcome to Nashville, albeit virtually. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Invest Nashville Conference. I want to thank Capital Analytics for putting together a great conference. For the past few months, they have worked around the clock to launch the Invest Nashville publication, along with crafting a program that shows the unique qualities of the region and highlights all the attributes of Nashville that makes us the IT city. I want to thank all the sponsors for the Invest Nashville Conference for supporting today's conference. Today's conference will feature speakers from three of Nashville's leading industries: healthcare, finance, and real estate development. These leaders are the reason why Nashville is one of the fastest cities to recover from the pandemic. Our economy has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the United States at less than 3%. The Today Show named Nashville as one of the best places to live after the pandemic. Nashville is truly a great city. From a thriving tech sector that features Amazon's 5,000 person operations center of excellence to a world-renowned healthcare industry, Nashville is a business juggernaut on a national and world stage. The leaders of Nashville have positioned the city very well and prepared it for the economic shocks over the past year. From the 2019 COVID pandemic, the 2020 Nashville tornado, and the 2020 Christmas Day bombing, Nashville has been challenged like no other city in the United States, but Nashville has persevered. Leadership from the public and private sector has guided Nashville through one of its darkest hours. And now the lights of Lower Broadway shining even brighter than ever. Since my arrival last year, I've been asked why I came to Nashville. Well, I came to Nashville because I believe in Nashville. Its story, its people, its food, the hot chicken, of course. The music of Nashville, especially our Fisk Jubilee singers. I also saw a unique opportunity to work with our 4 HBCUs: Fisk, Tennessee State, American Baptist College, and Meharry Medical Center. I saw a city on the move. During the early part of my tenure as the Director of Economic and Community Development, Oracle announced its plans to build its second headquarters here in Nashville, along the banks of the Cumberland River. The project will bring more than 8,000 jobs and foster more than $1 billion of development and capital investment. The Oracle project has been a catalyst for the development along the East Bank. For example, just last week, the Tennessee Titans announced a $600 million renovation to Nissan Stadium. The stadium project will be the epicenter of a new mixed-use neighborhood that will be home to thousands of residents and jobs, along with creating millions of dollars of new investment in the area. This is a game changer. Nashville is supporting its Titans on and off the field. We are expecting big things from them. And hopefully, we will all see them in Los Angeles playing in the biggest game of them all on February 13th, 2022. Go Titans. ULI and PwC named Nashville as one of the #1 real estate market in the United States. Is a testament to the vision and the drive of the leaders around attending today's conference. They had led Nashville to a supernova status. However, our success has had its challenges. We must remember that we must create and support a city that supports all its citizens. Nashville must develop an economy that is inclusive and equitable to all. Over the next few months, Nashville will develop a strategic plan and policy for economic development, while we have had a regional plan managed by the Nashville Chamber, being a partnership initiative. We will craft a plan that includes the residents and the businesses that reflects the needs and wants of the citizens of Nashville and Davidson County. The plan will be built around the cornerstones of a strong economic development vision, developing an economy that works for all Nashvillians, creating a world-class small business community for all Nashvillians, widening and enhancing our talent pipeline, and launching an economic development organization in Nashville that supports all aspects of economic development, from business attraction, small business development, workforce development, and community-based development and redevelopment. The leaders of Nashville are ready for the next chapter of Nashville's story, and Invest Nashville is part of that story. The value of Invest Nashville is that it brings us together to learn, to listen, to collaborate, and to build a prosperous Nashville. So I want to thank you all for attending today's conference, Invest Nashville 2022, and I look forward to seeing you all in Nashville in person soon. Stay safe and be well. Go Titans.
Thank you very much, Courtney, for being with us today and for your opening remarks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you all here with us today. I wish we could be gathered in person, but for those who do not know me, I'm Jack Miller, and I'm the Regional Director at Capital Analytics overseeing the South region. I would like to add my thanks also to everyone who contributed to this year's report, the inaugural edition of Invest Nashville. We are grateful for the wonderful long relationships we have developed in the market that have helped us produce this year's report. I want to take just a moment to update you on our work. Since publishing the first Invest edition in Miami 8 years ago, we have only continued to grow, having expanded throughout Florida and up the East Coast and into the Midwest. In addition to Nashville, we have first editions from Jacksonville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, North Central Jersey, Pittsburgh, and San Antonio, which are also about to be released. To sign up to receive any of our newsletters for any of these markets or a copy of our reports, please email contact@capitalalaa.com or visit our website, capitalanalyticsassociates.com. We have a great lineup for you today with 3 panel discussions, followed by our closing keynote address from Middle Tennessee State University, so stay tuned throughout. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel, Healthcare Hub, how Nashville's healthcare ecosystem is evolving amid accelerated industry change. Moderating this panel today is Tim Adams, President and CEO of Ascension St. Thomas and Senior Vice President, Ministry Market Executive, Ascension, Tennessee. Tim, thanks for being with us today. I can see you there. So I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the panelists and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jack. And good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to serve as moderator for our first panel focused on healthcare. My name is Tim Adams. I have the privilege of serving as President and CEO of Ascension St. Thomas here in Nashville. And with me today is an outstanding group of panelists. Haley Hovius, who is our President of the Nashville Healthcare Council, George Crawford, Executive Committee Member at Butler and Snow, and Chris Sterling, CEO of the Surgical Clinic. I know we have limited time and I want to keep us on schedule, so we're just going to jump right in. First question for our panelists. Nashville is known as the healthcare industry capital. Looking back, how would you describe the innovative spirit of Nashville's healthcare community? What are some of the positive takeaways and how have these shaped the sector's current landscape? So Haley, I know this is a topic that's very close to you and you'll want to make some opening comments given your role with Nashville Healthcare Council and your knowledge of how we became the healthcare industry capital. So I'll let you start us off.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tim. And I have to confess, I get to work with Tim as a board member all the time, and we're really fortunate here in Nashville to have such great leaders. Nashville's a unique healthcare community. I know that early on, a couple of cities were mentioned that Capital Analytics works with, cities like Minneapolis, like Raleigh, like Dallas. Those are all great healthcare cities. Nashville is unquestionably, though, the healthcare services capital of the nation. And what that really means is healthcare delivery is really headquartered here. So when you think about healthcare delivery and where the rubber meets the road of treating patients, the companies that are headquartered here have operations across the US. So it's really the ability to take healthcare at scale. It's the ability to use data. It's the ability to have a lot of efficiencies when they're doing things. And I think there's a wonderful statistic out there that it still takes 17 years from the time something shows up in the New England Journal of Medicine until it's in common practice. The goal of Nashville is to shorten that timeline and make sure that patient care gets better. So from that perspective, it's an important economic driver in the city, and it grew very similarly to the way that Silicon Valley grew. It started about 50 years ago with the founding of HCA. And the founders were very good about supporting entrepreneurs who would go out and found other companies. They were also good about identifying their own market opportunities and sending talented executives of their own out to found new companies. Those executives would go on to continue to reinvest in the industry, to continue to found new companies, and you end up with this beautiful virtuous cycle that essentially created the Nashville healthcare industry. When you think about that, you should think 18 publicly traded healthcare companies headquartered here, but you should also think about the 500 companies that are doing the work of healthcare in this community, and another 400 organizations, the law firms, the accounting firms that have very deep verticals in healthcare. So Nashville's healthcare landscape goes back 50 years. It's definitely the biggest that we have, biggest industry here in Nashville by far. You might hear, I think it was brought up a little bit, we're known for music. The economic impact of healthcare is about $67 billion a year. The impact of music is about 16. So it's roughly 4 times the size. Manufacturing is about a $70 billion economic impact, but from a jobs perspective, healthcare employs about 100,000 more people in our MSA. So just to level set for y'all, as you hear what's happening in the industry, I'm really excited. This continues to grow. The entrepreneurial spirit here continues to launch new companies, even through a pandemic, and maybe even more so. So with that, I'm going to let some of my other panelists talk a little bit now that I've level set for everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Haley, for those opening comments. And you're right, those of us in healthcare probably have an appreciation and a sense of pride around that, but I'm not sure, folks outside of healthcare can appreciate the size and magnitude of our industry here in Nashville. George, any thoughts on that initial question as well?
No, I think what Haley said is just right on. The enthusiasm that's even come out of the past 2 years, which has been obviously tough for everybody, is still there. It frankly, from a legal standpoint, I mean, and I think most healthcare lawyers or people who practice in the industry or related industries haven't seen anything stop. I mean, it just picked right on and people just kept on going, which I think is just a testament to the resilience of the industry here in Nashville. And I think what's happened is, and I think a lot of us have seen this just based on the different license plates that we see driving around town, is just the influx of people from out of town who have come in here and have wanted to see, have been a part of the healthcare world and want to take advantage of this opportunity and see the growth here, the enthusiasm, everything. And I think from one thing we see obviously is so much, there's so much money that's being pumped in, a lot of private equity coming in. And I think, and there are people who have different opinions on that. Some think, well, it's just going to, monetize the healthcare process and is going to hurt the standard of care. And frankly, what we've seen just over a period of years is that no, I mean, it's actually adding some of the efficiencies of the healthcare system. And I think, bringing new ideas. And so again, as Haley said, the entrepreneur spirit that has been just always been a part of Nashville is just continuing to thrive with other people coming in with new ideas. And so I think it's an exciting time and will continue to be in the future, definitely.
Great. Yeah, one of the things I love about Nashville is just the excitement and the vibrance of being here and the resilience of Nashville. And when you think about the challenging operating environment, specifically in healthcare, the last couple of years, how do you think Nashville has responded to those challenges and even potentially bolstered our reputation in the healthcare industry as the healthcare capital of the nation? Chris, I'll maybe let you start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and it's good to see everybody. Yeah, I think that, and we talked about this briefly kind of in preparing for this. I think you're actually, Tim, in a unique position to talk about this because I think there was, at least being healthcare providers in the city, as we do, we're surgeons. The hospital systems here communicated a lot there in the early stages of the pandemic to make sure everybody's kind of in lockstep. Everybody agrees, this is what we're doing and how we're addressing these things. And really set an example for the rest of us in the community. I think that example being set with several hospital systems in Nashville, all communicating, being in lockstep of how to handle this unprecedented event, really was a great example that was set in our city.
Yep, I agree. The way we all came together as competitors, yet allies, and our commitment to delivering healthcare for Nashville was remarkable and really just reinforced my pride of being part of this community. When you see the growth that's happening here in Nashville amidst lingering issues from the past few years, what do you believe are the main challenges and primary risks facing future growth and progression of healthcare industry at this time? Haley, you wanna start?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because I actually don't see a lot of true risk. I think what I've seen over the past few years is an acceleration of the industry in terms of innovation. I might have felt differently 6 years ago when I took this job and people were saying, oh, hospitals are going the way of the world. Right now, we've got a lot of new companies coming up, companies that are really focused on the areas in healthcare like value-based care, which is really where the industry is heading to. So I continue to see a lot of growth from that perspective. I had previously thought that capital was a real issue. Nashville continues to attract a lot of capital. I think Chris referenced that, maybe Georgia as well, that during this time period, we've seen a lot of private equity moving to town. We've seen a lot of venture capital moving to town, and those dollars, I think, also help to continuate the acceleration of the industry here. So I'm pretty bullish when I look at the industry. I think there's just so much great energy. I had a CEO that moved his headquarters to town a couple of years ago, and he'd always sort of been maybe a little down on Nashville. But I talked to him I'd interviewed him, and he said, Haley, I can't tell you. He said, I was so wrong. He said, all the innovation that I see in our company moving forward is coming from Nashville. And I think that's a great testament because he was not an adopter early on, but he definitely sees the energy. And I've seen that accelerate through the pandemic at a time when, if you're in the hospital industry, that was a very scary time early on in the pandemic. And I've seen the industry continue to move and evolve. I think there's a lot of work to be done. Things like I was mentioned as we opened up in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We still have a remarkably sort of vanilla-looking industry, and I think there's a lot of work to be done because I think when we talk health equity, that is something that Nashville could actually have I would view it as an opportunity, something that we could really have an impact with, particularly by combining the resources that our organizations have here at scale. So bullish overall, opportunity, not risk.
You and most. Any other thoughts, Chris or George?
Yeah, Tim, if I may, and Haley, I mean, you say a lot of great things, and I think those areas in healthcare in our city, especially in healthcare IT, and all this innovation that we're driving are phenomenal. We're attracting a lot of talent here now to push those things forward. Boots on the ground, I think, Tim and I certainly feel this probably more than anybody else, is staffing. We have a real staffing shortage right now of nurses, of medical assistants, those people that we need to be able to facilitate getting patients in to see us in the facilities and having, healthcare services performed of what needs to be done. So, we've seen a lot of movement out of that sector of the healthcare workforce in the last couple of years, and hopefully we can start to see some of that coming back. I know with new nursing schools and new medical schools that are coming on board in town, hopefully that will help. But that's really where we see a real focus of need right now, anyway.
And just to jump into, I think that there might be a few headwinds that could stand in the way of. I really don't think I'm with Haley. I think that there's plenty of capital that's out there, and that's nationwide, looking for new ideas, and just in just trying to look for things to invest in and put the money in play. I will say, obviously with an administration change that happened last year and kind of their focus a little bit more on some of the antitrust, consolidation, the antitrust results out of the consolidation of some of the healthcare industry, especially in the hospital world, but also in the non-hospital providers. I think there's going to be a little more scrutiny, I think, on some of this consolidation going forward. And I don't think this is focused on healthcare. I think it's a lot of different industries. But I think that that could be something that could maybe put a little bit of a pause on some of the growth that we see. That being said, I think there's so much opportunity out there for maybe smaller, providers out there, and the money is kind of running to that a little bit. We've seen, a lot of private equity jumping into certain areas of healthcare that you just never would have thought, whether it be the physician practices section, the ASC section, the EDs, those things that you see where you haven't really thought, well, this is where private equity wants it. They're there and they're going there. And again, the efficiencies are being passed down, I think, to those places. And so I think that's helpful, but I think there'll be some pressure on some of the consolidation just from the antitrust division of the feds and states.
Well, let's talk about, you referenced the workforce shortage or the great resignation, as it's been coined more recently. And we certainly feel it in our ministry here. And, there's a growing, what seems to be gap of individuals that don't have the necessary training or credentials to fill those roles. And many fear that the last 2 years is just going to continue to make that worse. So how do you think we need to innovate and look at how we put our workforces together to address that and mitigate this workforce shortage that we have today? Any thoughts on how we close the gap in innovation and how we deliver care?
Well, I think, Tim, at least from my perspective, I'm always going to be in favor of human contact when we deliver patient care, right? Now, I think there are certainly places where technological advancement and all these IT improvements can help with efficiencies and help cover some of that gap. I think what we need to do is pay more attention to what our employees, what our future employees, our potential employees are really looking for. And it's not always more pay, but it's something we've dealt with over the last couple of years, and we've come to realize is, remote work isn't necessarily a bad thing. I would have been completely against that for some of our staff a couple of years ago. That's not necessarily a bad thing. What other things are they looking for? It's really a lot about job satisfaction and being able to just understand what our employees want. How do we make them happy and keep them in not only our company, in our industry, and being able to provide those things. What's important to the people that want to work in our industry and provide that patient care.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Chris. I mean, how do we create that environment that they feel a sense of purpose and connect the purpose in what they do each and every day? It is a bit different than what you might get manufacturing something else. And so if we could somehow harness that. George, you referenced, antitrust and some other things that might be out there from a legislative or administrative priority perspective that could affect our future. Any other pending legislation or regulatory things that you see in the pipeline that could impact us?
Yeah, I think that antitrust is kind of a key part of it, because that has such a effect on the M&A space, especially on a larger scale. I think, obviously the CARES Act and all the money that's been pushed into, the healthcare industry, obviously other industries as well. When you have this influx of cash, in society by the government, well, there's gonna be fraud and abuse, and just by nature of it. And we've already heard some of the tales about that already happening in some situations. But I think there'll probably be a little bit of a scrutiny put on that use of the money down the line. I think most obviously the vast majority has been put to great use, and especially has helped with, especially in the healthcare industry with the money that's been put in through either PPP or provider, whatever fund, whatever. It's been very helpful. But I think there'll just be a little more scrutiny probably put on that. So I think again, it's how the administration wants to handle that. But I see that definitely will be an uptick in scrutiny put on that, just like is in the antitrust area. So I think that's one of the main things I would see.
Thanks. As the nation becomes more focused.
George, sorry,
Yeah.
Tim, if you don't mind. George, I think it's interesting that you mentioned influx of cash and kind of the effect that has on the system and the industry. We saw the same thing back 15 years ago when Medicare put in meaningful use, right? There's a huge influx of cash in the industry to move us toward a better end in electronic health records and electronic medical record systems. And yeah, where we are now compared to back then is great. And now we have some more ways to go with those kinds of things, but that really did move that part of innovation along such a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree, Chris. And it's almost, another thing to think about is the hospital transparency pricing, that's being put into play. A lot of providers are already doing that, have been doing that. And so it's almost, codifying something that's really already going on. So, but it's another kind of situation where it looks like, there's the regulation just to codify kind of what's already going on, which, some can see it good, some can see it bad, but I think, it's a reality, you guys. But you're right. It's where this influx of cash, keeping obviously payrolls going. That was the main thing with the CARES Act, but obviously putting this money in there where people can stay afloat and potentially use other funds, to drive that innovation that that Haley opened with. I mean, that's what it comes down to. We can use that money to do that.
We've spent some time looking back. Let's spend a few moments we've got left kind of talking about the future. So outside of all the excitement in healthcare from a pandemic perspective, it's also an exciting time to be in healthcare in a much different way when you think about the future of healthcare delivery and the tremendous amount of technological and scientific innovations that are taking place right now. So as it relates to the healthcare sector, what would you identify as the most exciting new innovation and or progress being made? And how could this change the future landscape of our business and sector as a whole? So Chris, I may toss this one to you first, get us started, and
sure,
forward to hearing from the others.
Well, on a little more granular focus, I work with a bunch of surgeons, so that's usually where my focus is. And, we're really pushing robotic surgery forward, which is really cool. So we're very excited about that, the potential of robotic surgery. On a more global scale, I think interconnection, interoperability with systems is something that we want to see. Make it, the hospital systems, our physician systems, make them communicate, talk better, make it easier to share medical records instead of more difficult. So as we continue to see, and there's already some of that going on now, I would love to see some more innovation there. Just make things easier, make it easier for us to provide the patient with the services they need, to be able to diagnose the patients in time, which, some of that requires some compliance to the patient's part, but being able to communicate easily between different systems, different providers, wherever the patient's seeking their care. That's kind of the thing that I'm really excited about seeing come down the road.
George?
Well, I'm probably the least informed. I'll pass this to Haley. I'm going to let her do it. I can find something good to talk about after they talk. The experts talk.
Sounds good. Haley?
I think particularly when I think about Nashville in the future, the work that Vanderbilt's doing, not everybody realizes that Vanderbilt Medical Center and the medical school have the largest genomics database in the country, and they're doing amazing work pairing clinical data with genomics work. And I think that eventually is going to have an amazing impact overall. I also think that in a Nashville specific way, the fact that we do have so much data, I mean, Nashville is home to more data than almost anywhere else in the country when it comes to clinical data. We have just so many headquarter health systems, so many headquarter organizations that deliver care, that from the data perspective, being able to take that data and use it well, I think is about to be unlocked in a really great way, both for, I mentioned health equity earlier, but just in general, the care delivery. And I think, going back to the earlier question about when we talked about things like, how are we going to make sure that our clinicians are better supported? How are we going to handle this shortage that we have? It's going to come down to things like technology and the better use of that data to be able to inform decision making and make people be able to practice at the top of their licenses and that stuff. And I'm excited. There's a lot of energy at certain of our universities around this. Vanderbilt, Belmont's doing a lot with data. We have a lot of colleges and universities here, and exciting stuff. From that perspective, I think that will continue to keep growing and affect healthcare at a national level.
Yeah, to maybe just tag onto that, Haley. I think, we say we're involved in healthcare, but I still think we're predominantly involved in sick care. We're reacting to an illness that's already there. And I'm with you. And I think about the innovation that's happening in genomics and the ability to manufacture, develop drugs very targeted, based on that to identify certain diseases and address those. And, to go in, I think 10, 15 years, they'll be taking a blood sample and telling you all the things that would be coming your way if we don't get ahead of this right now and proactively addressing those, so that we're really are involved more in healthcare than sick care and reacting to things that are there. How do you think Nashville looks 5-10 years from now? I mean, we have had such tremendous growth, not just in the healthcare space, but in so many other ways. So, well, let's maybe keep it primarily to the healthcare space. Are we still that healthcare capital? Do we continue to grow at the rates that we've been growing? Haley, I'll maybe start with you.
I see that continuing to happen. We just have too many great organizations that are getting started here that will continue to keep going. I mean, there have been some really big companies like Aspire and NaviHealth over the last few years that have grown up here quickly and then become part of other large organizations. I just see that cycle continuing. And I see, the companies here that do this work are really solid. They're the best in the country doing what they do. And we do need the sick care still. And I love to, and I think that continues, but I do think that hopefully we have the opportunity here to keep working on some of that other stuff, the well care. But I see it as even larger. My hope is that we continue to have, Nashville has a very collegial, it's a community, it's a friendly town. Those CEOs have come in from outside of Nashville always comment on that. Like, I've never been in a city where people are as friendly. Heard you have that conversation, Tim. I hope that continues, that spirit and that friendliness continues on even as we continue to grow.
Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I think Haley has a very unique perspective on this that a lot of us may not see. Being in the position she has, I think she's exactly right, though. I think we've seen such rapid growth over the last few years, and not just with more of these healthcare companies moving here. Now you have private equity basing themselves in Nashville, planting themselves in Nashville, right, to be able to better take advantage of these opportunities in our industry. I don't see it slowing down as the population continues to grow here. Healthcare will continue to grow here. I think innovation will continue to grow here. We have a lot of great minds in the industry here. We have a lot of great talent here, and I don't see that slowing down.
George?
Yeah, and just to follow up on all that, I mean, I think what's most exciting to see how the influx of, big relocations that have happened, just to throw out one Oracle, how is that going to affect healthcare? How is their presence going to affect healthcare? Is that ingenuity going to spill out from there and going to help you grow? And then, like HCA did, and then they, HCA started, and then so many people left to go form new. is that going to happen from the industries that are moving here, Amazon, Oracle, all those? Is that going to have an impact on the healthcare, especially in technology? It's got to. I mean, I think that's just where, I think once people move here, they usually stay. And I think that's hopefully what's going to happen again this time around. So that's what's going to be very exciting to see, just the new ideas that come in from healthcare, and especially in the technology wing of it.
Yeah. Nashville is just a very unique and exciting place to be. As I'm downtown or in the Broadway area, and I'm walking across the streets and just seeing the excitement, the vibrance, the growth that's happening here, not just in healthcare, but in many other industries, like you mentioned, Amazon, Oracle, and this is the place that people want to be. The in-migration is significant, and I would anticipate that continuing to happen and us continuing to own that title as the IT city. So, well, that's a wrap for us. We're just a couple minutes over our allotted time, but want to again thank our panelists. Appreciate your time, and I'll turn it back to you, Jack.
And if everyone can just hold for a quick second, we're just taking a quick photo. Smile.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you, Tim, Haley, George, Chris, for being with us today. We really appreciate that your insights on this healthcare conversation. So thank you again. Today, we are conducting two polls during the event to get your thoughts on current things happening in Nashville and in the world of business overall. The first of these will pop up on your screen now. So go ahead and answer the question, which is, we are all aware of major developments in the pipeline, such as Oracle, Amazon, Nashville Yards, and so on. However, we have some significant developments to be completed in 2022 and 2023. Which of these developments below are you most excited about? While you're answering the poll, as a reminder, all registered attendees today will receive complimentary access to read our Invest Nashville 2022 report digitally. Look out for an email that will be sent early next week. Also, we are currently live streaming on our YouTube page, where this event will also sit for anyone that would like to revisit it or share these great discussions around. I would now like to introduce our second panel for today's event, Future of Finance, what the future of the financial landscape looks like for 2022 and beyond. Moderating this panel is Harry Allen, Chief Relationship Officer at Studio Bank. Harry, if you could unmute yourself. Good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Good to see you as well. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the other panelists. If you could all turn on your cameras and unmute yourself as you come in, and I'll let you take it away, Harry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be the moderator for this panel on the financial services sector. And I am joined by some fantastic peers and colleagues in the industry this morning. First, we have Sarah James Lewis, who is the Senior Vice President and Director of Associate and Client Experience at Pinnacle Financial Partners. Good morning, Sarah.
Hi, Harry.
We have Johnny Moore, who is the Tennessee Region President of Truist Bank here in town, and Adam Sanseveri, who is Senior Vice President, Managing Director, and Head of Nashville Private Wealth for Bernstein. Good morning, everyone. Morning. So similar to the healthcare industry, the financial services industry has been really important to Nashville for decades. And you think about the growth and progress that our city has seen, access to capital and putting resources in the hands of entrepreneurs and business leaders is the responsibility of our sector. And so I'm super proud of the partnership that has existed for decades here in Nashville when it comes to banking and financial services. And to give the audience some perspective of where we've been and where we are, Sarah, when Pinnacle started in 2000, the Nashville banking sector was about an $18 billion industry. So $18 billion of deposits spread around the banks here in town. In 2008, when the last new bank started before Studio Bank, that market had grown to 32 billion, and then last year, almost 64 billion. So we've seen a tripling of the market here in Nashville since the year 2000, and it's really exciting to be a part of. So with that in mind and that backdrop, I want to ask first, how has the landscape changed for traditional banks? As we've experienced that growth, there's been new technology and ways about which we go about our work. So how has that changed from your perspective, and how has collaboration in particular within our ecosystem developed to benefit the overall community? Who wants to start? I'll start with Adam.
Sure. Nice to see you, Harry, as always. And thanks, everyone. I mean, look, I think this is an exciting question as someone who's a part of a firm that after 50 years on Wall Street chose to move to Nashville, right? And relocate our global headquarters, our C-suite, 1,250 people, largest office out of 53 in the whole world. So the landscape is changing drastically, especially when you think locally. But I think more on a more micro level to your question, the change has accelerated and it's faster paced in so many ways and in so many reasons. And I think what that's doing is it's creating more offerings for customers, which creates higher servicing standards and which creates the need for differentiation. It causes organizations to be hyper focused on what they do best rather than being generalists. And Harry, you and I know this well as two organizations that partner closely together and are very focused on the one things that we do, you banking, AB, investments, and research. So you're seeing the high net worth clients, high demand clients decoupling services and demanding the best people for each job. And I think that increases collaboration, and that's good for the community.
Yeah. Johnny, how about you? What do you feel has changed the most about the landscape in banking and how we serve?
I think the probably aspect that hasn't been discussed is the electronic and technologies. People want to bank where they want to be, and that is different. I mean, 10 years ago, people wanted to go in the bank, talk to someone. Now they don't want to talk to people for the most part. They want to execute their transactions electronically. And so the banking industry has really had to reinvent itself on the technology side to provide clients with the opportunity to interact electronically, but in a safe environment. Because one of the big parts of our business that we fight every day is fraud. And as you get more electronically enabled and the more freedom, more access points, all that risk increase exponentially. But the most important thing, clients want to be banked the way they want to be, when they want to do it, and you've got to provide the technology. And that's a big investment that all banks have really had to step up on to meet the unique needs of their clients.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about consumers or business owners who are running businesses. They want tools readily available to make their lives as easy as possible. Sarah, anything else to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think we've had in the past some sort of fragmented pockets of greatness when it comes to technology. We took one journey and we over-engineered it, so it's just absolutely perfect, but it's still sort of stacked upon legacy technology that created maybe a bumpy experience. I think the collaboration in the ecosystem is better than it's ever been. And so I see that it's not just the large banks, it's the midsize and regional banks that can partner with fintech, can invest in fintech, and that it's getting easier to create those sort of simple, seamless experiences that clients really demand. So I think the opportunity is just incredible right now for us to adopt cloud technologies and overcome all the challenges of our legacy systems.
Yeah, and what's been interesting for me and Studio Bank, we invested heavily in technology, even as a startup bank, and really focused on driving digital experience, understanding that that's how most clients are going to interact with a bank versus walk into a brick and mortar branch, to Johnny's point. But that focus on partnership isn't neglected either. So it's been really interesting that the technology has to be additive to that contact and relationship when you have a need as an individual or business owner. So it's a fascinating time in our industry for sure. So next question, Johnny, I'll pitch this one to you. In the height of the pandemic, we saw rates fall off of a cliff. which meant that borrowing has been really inexpensive, and that's been a very great environment for a lot of people. But this year, there's indications that we could see rising interest rates in 2022. Give our audience some perspective on how that could impact our sector in banking as a whole, and what that might mean for businesses and consumers here in Nashville.
Oh, I think when you talk about interest rates, the Fed has projected that we will see 1 to 2 increases this year. So that's going to increase the cost of capital. We, over the last 5+ years, have enjoyed record low interest rates, which has allowed the borrowing power of a lot of individuals to increase, which has spurred the growth in Nashville. You talk about housing, how the housing has exploded, but it's also exploded because you got 2.5%, 3% interest rates, and you can afford a lot more house. You know, if you're looking back in the 1980s when inflation was through the roof, interest rates were 21%. $1 million house at 21% is really expensive. I'm not saying we're going to that level, so I don't want to scare anybody today, but the cost of capital will increase, and that's going to change the buying power of the individuals in our community. But also it's going to affect the whole economy, because as that happens, you know, you got less money to do other things, and it's just going to keep trickling down, and it's going to be more pressure. And when you see our economy now, where we've seen the cost of things go up already because of inflation, and it's mainly salaries, because people have made a conscious decision that, hey, some want to work, some don't want to work. This pandemic has changed their whole mindset of what a career looks like and what's more important to them. So when you factor in all that, the cost of capital increase, it's going to dramatically impact. And, you know, overall inflation is going to continue as rates go up, unfortunately. But, you know, we can't stay where we are. It's just unfathomable that we can be at this level this long. And, you know, on the bright side, a lot of people complaining about their deposits not getting any upside. Well, this will be the opportunity to upside to their deposits a little bit, but you're going to pay more in the loans because you're getting more on the deposit side. So it's a balancing act. So it's something that we all just going to have to deal with, but it's coming.
Yeah, and Adam, from a private and kind of wealth management standpoint, how are your clients thinking about the prospects of a rising interest rate environment and higher costs of capital?
Yeah, thanks, Harry. It's a nuanced question because there's so many factors to it. To parlay off what Johnny said, I mean, look, we love the banking sector right now. From an investment standpoint, those increased fees on deposits, or what investors are going to get back on deposits, makes keeping capital in bank accounts maybe a little bit more interesting. You know, rising rates has a massive effect of valuations across every single company. So if you've got strong cash flow and are pretty cheap, as most financial companies are, versus a high flying tech company with very little actual earnings, right? Actual net profit, those valuations have to come down. So you're seeing a massive rotation from an investment standpoint. And this is where the research comes to pay off. And you tie that to inflation, and the real interesting parts of dissecting inflation against goods versus services, right? Goods inflation at 17%, services at 4%. Services inflation is sticky, goods is more transitory. It really brings on a lot of complexity on where you're going to move capital next for this market cycle.
And I wanted to touch on the interest rate environment for a bit, because as we think about the number of folks moving to Nashville and the dynamic housing market, you know, that increase in rate and impacting your borrowing power, to Johnny's point, may cause things to slow down. It will be interesting to see.
I would say possibly, but you got to look at where the people are coming from. They're mainly coming from New York, California, markets where housing costs are way more expensive than Nashville, if you want to believe that or not. So when they come to Nashville, they feel like they're getting a break. And the other thing that's going to be good for Nashville is no state income tax. Most of these individuals are coming from places where high state income taxes, high property taxes, and they're coming to Nashville and they're getting relief from all those perspectives. What's going to be the problem when I look at Nashville is just existing Nashvillians who are not getting acceleration in wages, their ability to afford houses. That's where the crisis is going to be. How can they move up, how they can get starter houses, how they can move up through the housing chain, because that's what the biggest problem is. It's not going to be the outsiders, because most of them are going to be having high paying jobs coming from higher cost of living environments. And so that's where the dynamics kick in.
Challenges also, like as we recruit corporations and they look to relocate, not having workforce housing, not having affordable housing for people who are coming to take all these jobs that Courtney's bringing to us, what are we going to do?
Yeah. And put some numbers on that, right? You're moving from New York. That's a 13% savings in taxes. And if rates go up, 0.5% this year, maybe. Yeah. That's not that big of a delta. Right.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. There's a question that has come from the audience that I want to pose, and anyone can speak to this, but with tax reform, we saw a lot of investment in opportunity zones. And so there was a question about our respective organizations, and just a curiosity if any of us have partnered with clients in investing in opportunity zones here in Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely. On our end, we've done one up in Nashville above the river near Oracle's development. We do them all over the country. When you work with business owners in such a high transaction time, when M&A has been off the charts and there's so many sales, capital gains, real estate capital gains, the ability to defer through this great legislation and put money to work in community developments, opportunity zones have never been hotter. So it's a big area of focus in our world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We've had some limited exposure there as well. But I think the thing we've been doing mainly, especially in the Tennessee markets, is really utilizing new market tax credits to bring another source of affordable capital to unique projects to really try to balance out the total community and really help those communities in need where new jobs are being created. And that just has been a great asset for us to really impact those communities and really live our purpose to inspire and build better lives in communities.
Yeah. And, the whole purpose of the opportunity zone legislation was to invest in areas of need. And Sarah, I want to direct this next question to you. And we've touched on it a bit, this dynamic of the progress of Nashville really creating prosperous situations for some of our neighbors, but not all. And as Nashville continues to grow and becomes even bigger and more diverse, institutions like ours have been called to a responsibility and advocacy from a corporate perspective. And in our opening comments, Ms. Maloney mentioned that you have to lead from the inside of this issue, equity, inclusion, shared prosperity. So how has Pinnacle thought about ESG and our sector's role in helping Nashville become the most equitable city it can be?
I think there are a lot of us who are really excited to take the partnership and the investment to a new level. And that sort of idea of providing access to capital and ensuring everybody has an opportunity to participate in Nashville's prosperity is a big one. It's always been a commitment. So between investments and lending and grant money, we've had $900 million committed to affordable housing and small business support and minority-owned businesses. And much of that is concentrated in Middle Tennessee because those who are headquartered here invest here. Those who have local bankers here, just integrate and care about it. And banks are a critical piece of this puzzle. I think we have to have this opportunity to be a connection point, right? So we're looking at it in terms of public, private, and nonprofit services. We're there with the client and we have the opportunity to connect them to the best path to financial success and to build wealth. And so if we can be that person on the front line to provide advice for greater access to home ownership or growing their small business, entrepreneurial classes, if we can generate wealth in underserved communities. And so we've got to be really adept at knowing who all the potential partners are out there. And so that means training all of our bankers on, okay, if you have a client that's facing this issue, this is an organization you can reach out to. This is somebody you could touch. This is a grant program they can tap into. I think from a theme perspective, the way that we're thinking about it is one of the contributing factors in the whole Great Resignation is that people know. And so we had so many bankers that during PPP felt like, man, this is our chance to be on the front line of helping people. Like this, we feel like a nonprofit, like we're doing great service work. And so in that same way, I think this opportunity right now, this moment, is the way that we tie the work that we do to true purpose. Yeah. And it's good for our culture. It's good for our brand. It's fantastic for the community and the shareholders.
For sure. Yeah, in the height of the pandemic, I often said it felt like we were on the front lines of sorts. Not sewing masks, but bankers were definitely called to service. Adam or Johnny?
Yeah, Harry, I was going to say, Sarah makes a really good point that also changed investor mindset. Going through the pandemic, there was an existing trend towards ESG, but it was moving at what many would say too slow of a pace. The acceleration of that trend where investors demanded an ESG lens on where they put their capital in everyday investments, 401ks, taxable accounts, all of that kind of stuff. And what that effectively did is empowered firms to really take a seat at the table with companies that you're investing in and saying, hey, we're going to invest X billions of dollars in your company if you do X, Y, and Z. And the result of that is ESG investments have been outperforming regular non-ESG investments at a higher rate than ever before. So this benefits everybody and is not a trend that we think is going to go away.
Yeah. Johnny, how is Truist? I know you all are doing some particular things with financial literacy and making sure folks are as informed as possible. But what do you have to add to the ESG conversation here?
Well, I think that's a very important and critical conversation that we're having all over America today. As we created Truist with the SunTrust and BB&T consolidation, we made a $60 billion pledge to really commit to improve the lives, inspire and build better lives in the community, but specifically in affordable housing, workforce development, education, HBCUs. And we've stayed true to that mission. I know when a lot of people see big banks, they say the sixth largest bank, you're just here to gather deposits, send it to the headquarters and do something, but we're the biggest community bank you ever saw. And we are committed to our markets. We put significant dollars in Nashville and all over the whole state of Tennessee. In all the markets we serve, we have, but specifically in developing a low-income housing, job training, and financial well-being. Financial literacy has been part of our mission for a while. We did a survey maybe 3 years ago, and it came back that 70% of Americans don't have $2,000 saved in event of an emergency in their savings account. If something happened that was over $2,000, they were going to have to borrow money from a financial institution. If they weren't qualified for that, a family or friend. That's not sustainable for the United States of America, and that's not a good standard. And we committed when we had that data to really to be impactful, to do something different, and that's why we spent a lot of time on financial literacy. We did the first, bond for ESG bond that came out. We were one of the first sponsors to do that. And it was just really our effort because we truly understand if we build our communities, we will build our bank. And it's not about being a big bank, but it's being built about a bank that cares about the communities and delivers on all aspects of that care.
And this is an area where, the collaboration I see happens quite frequently in a market like Nashville, where there is tremendous need, and not one organization can meet all of the needs of a city that's growing as fast as ours. And so I'm really proud of the institutions in our market that are partnering with the community in meaningful ways. This next question, Sarah.
I could say on that, I think we have great opportunity to partner with each other too. And so we recently partnered with Citizens Bank to build a business coalition that's about expanding access to youth economic education. And so really what we're doing here in Middle Tennessee is getting the junior achievement curriculum into schools that did not access it previously. And so we're getting kids who, because of their school not having the funding or the transportation required to get the kids to Finance Park or BizTown, we're underwriting those schools to be able to participate in the program. And so I think when we as banks sit on the same side of the problem and we work together, because there's plenty of problems to go around, then I think we would really remove barriers to access.
In the cross sector, so you mentioned junior achievement. We have a partnership with Community Foundation and a local CDC in town that's providing capital to founders of color, in particular because of the challenges that have existed historically for entrepreneurs of color to get small business loans. And so, yeah, I think you're exactly right. This is a huge opportunity for Nashville's organizations to work together. So switching topics in a really major way, I've gotten a question from the audience that I absolutely anticipated. Cryptocurrency, and how is this emerging trend that actually seems to be gaining mainstream acceptance impacting the banking and financial services industry?
Do you want me to take that, Harry?
Who wants to start?
Yeah,
Adam?
Yeah, I can start.
Adam, we'll let you have that one.
I talk about this stuff. I talk about this stuff every single day, it seems like now. And it's interesting because it's one of the biggest changes the financial industry has seen, as definitely in all of our lifetimes. But I think, the question can sort of be answered with a fundamental principle, and that's the value of research, the value of knowledge, right? Volatility and unpredictability are sort of relevant terms when it comes to investing. But this type of innovation is really exciting because it creates new opportunities for experts like all of us on this call to add value to investors. It adds the opportunity for them to have greater growth in their investments. And it also has like we were talking about before on ESG, the ability to affect society in a good way. Think about the power of blockchain in what it's doing in real estate and art and in so many different areas. The challenge, I think, is the industry and investors believing that luck is the same thing as skill when it comes to speculation around these unpredictable investments, which we've seen a ton of recently. So firms like ours all have to evolve our capabilities to keep up with the research that it takes to provide good advice. Otherwise, it becomes purely transactional for clients, which they can do with these newer technologies on their own. And long term, I think that's good for the landscape for businesses because we're needed more.
Yeah, I would add on, banks are exploring that more, but it becomes a unique challenge for banks. As one of the founding principles of banks now, with our responsibilities to the Secret Service, is know your clients. And if you don't know where the money is coming from, where it's going, who owns it, it becomes very problematic for banks. And so until we see some advanced regulatory guidance or compliance about how we can do this, banks are going to have to be really slow into this because, as of now, I guess you saw even with cash apps, the government is now figuring out how to get banks to report those transactions going through cash apps, how people are getting paying, because that's the new mainstream of paying. And, for taxes, compliance, and all that, it's the dynamics of the financial industry are more dynamic now than they've ever been. And so as the banks and the government relies on the banks to say, to know your clients, this becomes very difficult, even though it's a very unique and special situation and everybody likes new things, but it's kind of hard to sell it as an investment when the benchmarks are not there. It could change. You don't know what's driving it. It's so new that it's not new, but it's just something the bank's going to have to slow walk because of our fiduciary responsibility and for understanding who our clients are and what they're doing.
Yeah. So I've been given the signal. We have time for one more comment, and I think this one I'll start with you, Sarah. But in our financial services sector, and trying to keep up with the growth of Nashville, it has presented a war for talent. And so on the employee side, from a culture building standpoint, what is important? And this may be industry agnostic, but how do we win the talent game in the future going forward?
I think as we scale up, there's a need for more controls and bureaucracy, and all that starts to creep in, and all that starts to just irritate people. I think that most bankers, most people enjoy working where they can make things happen, where they can make things happen easily, where they can make decisions. And so they're frustrated with sort of the bureaucracy, the sales cultures, the profits over purpose, all of that kind of stuff. I think that cultures that can put people above processes, they're going to ultimately win out. And so I think Chris Sterling was pretty spot on about understanding people's changing expectations, their motivations, the things that really matter. And then, especially when it comes to greater work-life balance, the banks that are open to listening, that they are open to adjusting and have a high level of trust, they're going to have a leg up on the war for talent. We're all going to have to pay up. And so, we need to get really comfortable with that. Those that can't adapt, they're going to struggle to recruit.
Yeah. Johnny or Adam, anything to
I would say Sarah is spot on. I mean, the point is, it's a good time to be in banking. But the unique situations are, it's more than just a job now. People got to believe in your purpose, your mission, and connect that to their purpose and mission. And that's how you're going to retain teammates. But over the last 2 years, the freedom of working from home is a new dynamic that's not going to go away. And much as banks like to have people in the building to network, to connect, to learn from each other, that's going to be hard to keep that culture, because a lot of people can work from home and work anywhere. So what the phenomenon you're seeing is, people live in Nashville, but their job is in New York, or their job is in California. So they're working from home. So the point of getting everybody in the building every day and building a culture and all that, it's going to be really hard, and especially for the younger people coming into the business. Because if everybody's remote, how do you really learn? How do you learn the ins and outs of how to develop relationships with clients? How do you understand the credit process? How do you understand the investment strategy if all you're doing is looking at a WebEx or Zoom, and you don't have that one-on-one time to say, hey, when you're walking down the hall, hey, come over here, let me talk to you. Let me show you what we went over today and make sure you really understand. So for the younger generation, that's going to be the tough part. Yeah. For the more seasoned veterans, they're in heaven. They can stay at home, make plenty of money, work from 12 to 5 in the morning and do whatever they want to do the rest of the day. But for the younger people, I don't know. It's going to be a hard process for them to learn.
And to that point, and it's a great point, it's why the growth of Nashville has to be managed well, because for those folks to want to live here, not want to live and work remotely, we need to make sure we manage housing prices, public transportation, public education, and all that stuff. The talent pool here is exploding. When I look at our business, we're competing with Amazon and Oracle for most of our people, right? That's a great thing for everybody, but they may not want to move here in the future if we don't manage this growth.
Right. Nope, you're exactly right. Well, with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much, Sarah, Johnny, and Adam, for allowing me to bring some perspective to this conversation on what we're seeing in the financial services industry, and to let everyone know that, as Nashville grows and progresses, the industry that's been really important to providing opportunities and access to capital is robust as ever. And we are fully engaged and excited about the road ahead. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
If everyone can just hold, we're going to take a quick picture. Smile. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, Sarah, Johnny, Adam, for being with us today. We appreciate your comments and that excellent discussion on the future of finance. So thank you again. And thank you to the audience for answering our first poll that we put up earlier. Again, the results will be revealed at the end of the event. The second poll will pop up now. So go ahead and answer as to what is your top priority for your office in 2022. In addition to revisiting this event on our YouTube page, you can also go there as well to check out our Invest Insights video platform that Abby mentioned earlier. Our Invest Insights Season 5 will begin coming up in March of this year. Also, research is currently underway or about to begin for our newest editions of Invest Charlotte, Invest Raleigh-Durham, and Focus Atlanta. If anyone would like to participate in any of these editions, please reach out to me at jmiller@capitalaa.com. I wanted to mention as well that this event today is being broadcast on the public access channel at Middle Tennessee State University. So for all of those watching there, we appreciate you tuning in. It's now my privilege to introduce our final panel for today's event, Smart Development, the integral role thoughtful development plays in Nashville's future. This panel today will be led by Mark Deutschman, founder at the City Living Group. Mark, as soon as you're up, if you want to unmute yourself and turn on your camera. There we go. Hi, Mark. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Great panel you just had.
Yes, they were great. So, and I'm sure this one will be excellent as well. I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the other panelists and take away the discussion.
Well, thank you. Again, we're talking about smart development and the integral role that thoughtful development plays in Nashville's current and future success. And we have Janet Miller here, who is the CEO of Colliers International Nashville. We have Marshall Crawford, who is the president and CEO of the Housing Fund. And we have John Vardaman, who is the Nashville Business Unit Leader at DPR Construction. To set the stage, so in the beginning of 2020, we had our third mayor in 3 years. We had just hosted the spring meeting in 2019 for about 4,300 top real estate professionals and investors who were enthralled with our city and loved our Music City brand. We had construction cranes all over the city, and then we had a pandemic. And if you hunkered down during the pandemic and didn't go out much, when you came out, you realized that construction workers were essential workers, and all of those cranes had really tall buildings next to them. And I think it was very disoriented. The city was growing before our very eyes. We topped off 2020 with the bombing of some of the oldest buildings in downtown Nashville, which sort of reset what we're thinking about the riverfront. And then in 2021, we had another announcement, not just Amazon, but Oracle's locating here, and they're going to be on the east bank of the river. Sort of fascinating intro. I want to ask everybody, what do you think about some of the key distinctions between the pre-pandemic economy and where the market currently stands? Maybe I'll throw that first to Janet.
Okay, great. It's great to see everybody today. Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. I would say, my view of what happened during the pandemic was it was a real scary thing, and it was a hard time in real estate. It was just like it was for everybody. My view is there was a short game and there's a long game when it comes to the city, and that the fundamentals of Nashville that were so strong before the pandemic, and we know what they are: no personal income tax, great location, 18 colleges, university, creative class, companies chasing talent. That was the situation before the pandemic. That is the situation after the pandemic, or on the tailing end of the pandemic. My view is the fundamentals of the city didn't change. We just had a few months back in the darkest days where everything hit pause for a minute. Now some things changed, right? Office space. I don't think there's many companies that are going back 5 days a week full time, but I think that the industry itself has continued to thrive, and the investment dollars that when the ULI was here, Mark, every investor in the company went down the hall and told their guy, get in there, get into Nashville. I don't think that has changed at all. So while things have adjusted and we can talk about the changes, I think the fundamentals are still strong. And that's why I think we're seeing a strong industry continue despite this blasted pandemic. So,
we were rated number 3 in emerging trends from ULI back in 2019. And I think again in 2020, at the end of 2021, we were rated number 1 in emerging trends. So the rest of the country and the world had us in thinking that this is one of the best places to be. Curious, John, what you thought about, I mean, you lived through the pandemic, you were managing projects, even if some of us were hibernating because those buildings are built. What do you think about pre versus post?
Yeah, Mark, I was glad to hear what you said about, construction workers actually turned out to be pretty essential and sort of never slowed down during the pandemic in many cases. And certainly agree with Janet, the fundamentals remain the fundamentals, and it's a great story. I would say, particularly as it affects the construction industry, but really every industry, probably the only thing we're more tired of hearing about than the phrase pandemic or COVID is supply chain. And that's probably, yeah, no one likes to hear that. But really it's always been an issue. And pre-pandemic, it was something that popped up every now and then. How just globally networked we all are with the supply chain. But I really think the pandemic has brought that into focus. It's not just the supply, right? It is actually the focus is on the chain. In many cases, the parts and pieces, the equipment that you need can actually be made, but getting it to where you need it, when you need it, it can be tremendously challenging. And so I think we've really tried to focus on building a lasting sort of resiliency around how to monitor that, how to handle those surprises. And I think that's one of those just enduring lessons learned that we will carry on with us even after the pandemic's over.
I'd ask Marshall the same question from your perspective, Marshall. It does seem like there's a lot of pressure in the housing market in Nashville with all these people coming in, and that was happening again before the pandemic, but it seems to have accelerated.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And, I would agree with what Janet said about the fundamentals and the principles of the city still being the same. But John touched on, the supply chain, the cost of goods and services. I would say the difference is that there is a greater sense of urgency around affordable housing in particular. There were many people who were struggling before finding, affordable and decent housing and safe and vibrant communities. I think that sense of urgency now is even greater. Remember, before the pandemic, we went to work and it was fine. We were only in our house for a short period of time. And then during the pandemic, we were in our homes at 24 hours a day for some of us. And it really convinced us that, sheltering in place is really a critical component of what we need to think about as we go forward. And so fast forward on for the nonprofit sector, increasing and developing affordable housing has always been, where we were in from a greater sense of urgency. But I think everybody else now has that same sense of urgency and trying to make sure that individuals have housing. If you listen to the last two panels, you'll see even their conversation was about real estate and about housing. So this is a great way to end this conference and talking about a critical element, and that's around sheltering in place and housing in general. I just think there's a greater sense of urgency now after the pandemic than there was before the pandemic.
It's one of the panelists noted that, it's not such a burden to come to Nashville if you're coming from New York City, Chicago, LA, Silicon Valley, Seattle, where we're getting so many of our new residents, but it is driving up the price for locals who are having to compete against that kind of demand in the housing market. And we are seeing multiple offers on almost every house that comes to market at this point, and it's driving people to the new construction and residential real estate in a way we haven't seen before. And they're paying top dollar, which has actually been helping with supply chain issues, John. Well, John, question for you. You've got some pretty amazing projects in the works. You came from San Francisco a few years ago. I'm curious how this market compares to what you saw living in San Francisco, and what kind of opportunities your firm is taking advantage of. You're building some really great things. Give me sort of the lay of the land.
Sure. And came back to the South because I'm from Mississippi. So I just don't want everybody to get the misimpression here in Nashville that I'm from California sometimes. But I think the neat thing is that we're seeing a lot of similar projects that we would see that would be categorized as like West Coast projects, right? There's the previous panelists have either talked about or been from some of those companies that are coming from some of the major metropolitan areas in finance, Alliance Bernstein. But you also have some really strong technologically innovative companies Oracle's been mentioned several times. The now Meta data center that's up in Gallatin, that we're privileged to be a part of. You have some really high-tech projects that are coming to this part of the country, Nashville specifically, but also just Middle Tennessee in general, with some of the electric vehicle infrastructure projects that have been announced recently. And so you see all of those high-tech projects coming. And I think, this year on Invest Nashville, you see healthcare, finance, and construction. I don't really think it's going to be too much longer where you're going to have a technological component, a technology component to the, that's a really strong base of the industry here in Nashville. And we're seeing construction projects that are supporting that both now and then sort of in the pipeline many, many years out.
Yeah, my wife Sherry and I co-chaired the Entrepreneur Center's Next Awards this year, and we've been seeing so many great tech startups coming to our city, and I can see why. And then also some great reinvestment in tech that really supports all sectors of the economy, all people of the economy as well.
A lot of it's homegrown. That's a great point, Mark. It's really exciting to see that.
Well, Janet, I'm sure you've seen with this significant job creation and considering all those people who want to invest in Nashville from the spring meeting and today, what are some of the current opportunities and challenges you're experiencing as the head of Collier? I bet your brokers are having bidding wars in your sector too.
Yeah, I got tickled. One of the prior panelists said it's a good time to be in banking. It's a pretty good time to be in commercial real estate in Nashville. But I would say, all the sectors are hot, right? Industrial is the one that's really on fire. I know, John, you all are up in that. And part of it, I think this is kind of interesting, just an interesting fact, which is prior to the pandemic, only 11% of sales, retail sales, were done online, only 11%. So during the pandemic, it jumped up to about 16%. And as you can see, that has just driven this frenzy in the industrial sector, because you got to have these giant million-square-foot boxes to put all that stuff, right? That's why Amazon, all these fulfillment centers are thriving. If you think about that, though, you've still got 87% of retail that remains being done in brick and mortar stores. So to me, that just says, as people get more and more comfortable buying online, the industrial sector is just going to continue to explode, just because we all figured out how convenient it is to have your groceries delivered to your door. So the industrial sector is really, really hot. The other thing I would say, if you look for a common thread between sectors, and every panel has talked about it, it's all about job creation and talent. So if a corporate office needs talent, you're going to see it growing in Nashville. If a retail sector needs talent, because talent is being attracted to the city just because it's such a darned amazing place. And every real estate investment and project that we see, I don't care if it's self-storage investment or whatever, is tied to attracting job and solving the talent question. So I think that's the common factor. There is no sector that is in trouble in Nashville, but we are in a rarefied atmosphere in the world as a city. And you know that, Mark. I think all of us know it. If you'd asked me 30 years ago when I was chasing manufacturing companies, in LA to move to Nashville, that we would be sitting here today, I probably would have told you we're crazy, but a lot of people have done the right things. And so we truly are in a bit of a rarefied atmosphere as a city. And I think we need to kind of appreciate that.
I think one of the last panelists mentioned, or maybe it was previous, but we are still it city. We have that going on at this point. Marshall, all this smart development and affordable housing, they definitely go hand in hand. And sir, what are some of the nuances, some of the things that we're doing to develop affordable housing? And then how are you working with some of like MDHA is redeveloping Casey Homes and some of the community housing? And then also we have some really amazing opportunities potentially with Amazon with their investment in the community and affordable housing. How are you stewarding all that, and give us some examples of some great things that you're doing?
Yeah, so thanks. And that's a great question. We're actually, working in projects, both large and small, going from multifamily units, about 128 units for one project, all the way down to a single house where an individual needs capital to be able to, repair that home, rehabilitate that home, and allow it to maintain a certain level of affordability. The most critical part, Mark, where we're talking about all of this smart development, and a lot of times we're talking about new units that are being built. But I would say the most critical part of this is also the preservation of units. There has to be more preservation. If we're just building new units, but yet we're losing the affordable housing units there, then we're right back at the same place. So we have to be very intentional and very smart, in doing development that allows us to build new units, but also preserve existing units as well. And so MDHA, with the envisioning process, which is really a process where it engages the community and the leaders to be able to talk about what that looks like in that particular place and being able to revitalize those public housing units. So MDHA, the Metro Development Housing Authority, has done a great job and continues to be the largest developer in our city of affordable housing at 80% and below area median income, because that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about affordable housing. So not only have we done that, we're also providing, capital to developers that want to do it. Many of the developers that are coming to us are for-profit developers saying, how can I play a role in developing affordable housing? So what we're finding is there's an opportunity for us to have mixed income units being developed. We're trying to get away from this concentrated poverty around affordable housing. So what we want to do is engage in, I know that MDHA is doing a lot of that, but so are our nonprofit developers as well. We have a very engaging nonprofit community that is looking to sustain and build affordable housing, utilizing, the community investment tax credit, which is a great instrument in partnering with financial institutions to provide capital at 0% interest based on the type of structure that it is set up with. We talked about the increase in interest rates. Yeah, it's gonna impact the residents or individuals who want to buy homes, but for the nonprofit sector, it still is a very attractive tool for us to be able to borrow capital and allow us to continue to provide affordable housing throughout the city. And then I would say the Barnes Fund, the city has done an awesome job growing that particular fund from $10 million, and now I think it's approaching 20-something million dollars. Is that enough? A lot of people will say, no, it's not enough, but it's a lot better than where we were and which we were starting. And again, when I spoke about the greater sense of urgency, that is a good start for us because we're getting the capital that we need to be able to help in those communities that have been hit hardest by gentrification. And now how do we preserve some of that and being able to do it in a very smart and strategic and intentional way?
I like some of the work of Rebuilding Nashville Together, where they're coming in and retrofitting existing houses, and not only just retrofitting for energy savings to help seniors cut down on cost. They're also sort of doing deep retrofits so those people can, seniors can age in place, communities can stay in place.
They're doing it. And Mark, there's also, be a helping hand that is building large homes for large families. And then you also have affordable housing resources that are building those micro homes as well. So it is the innovation that you're talking about with Rebuilding Together and what they're doing, but also Project Together, what they are doing also in building and rehabbing homes, buying homes where individuals that are formerly incarcerated are coming out and being able to get in homes as well. So there's a lot of innovation and a lot of opportunity around the affordable housing. Not nearly enough. We definitely need more, but there are some creative ways that some of the nonprofits and even for-profit developers are doing to create more affordable housing.
Mark, I might tag on, and Marshall, I'd love to hear your take on this. Land's just gotten expensive in Nashville.
Yeah, it has.
If you want to talk about the barriers and some of the challenges, I'm sure for you, Marshall, finding the land to build anything on has gotten so expensive. Everybody wonders why they want to put a 41-story tower outside my window right here where this neighborhood is zoned for 8 stories. It's because the land's gotten so expensive that to make the numbers pencil in, these developers need more density. I see John nodding here. So I do think we went from being this kind of low cost place to this moderate cost, high quality place.
Yeah.
And it's impacting affordable housing. It's impacting everything up the line.
Well,
It
all of
makes
that
me think of, I was just thinking about the transit and housing go hand in hand, transit and affordable housing go hand in hand as well. And I know we've had some issues really developing our transit system, and we still have opportunities that are emerging, but I still think that we've gotten the opportunity to, do transit-oriented development. We can really think about some of the corridors and put the density in where it's needed, and then add all the services to create walkable urban neighborhoods. And then you also have the whole greenway system that's emerging, and you have places where greenways, transect corridors where you get an opportunity to do T squared OD. You get transit and trail oriented development. You can really zone to create opportunities for bonuses for affordable housing and some other things. Also, figuring out how we can create not just affordable housing, but affordable living. So I think that's one of the challenges we have to think about for the future, is really thinking about some of these emerging corridors to create the affordability that we need.
But a
And
lot
Marshall,
of it,
sorry, I interrupted you.
You're good, Mark. I was just going to, Janet, when you look at this, all of it is, there's a great deal of profitability that is a part of this. Everybody wants maximum dollar for that land and for their home. And a lot of times you can't blame them, but that, it's almost to the point to whereas how do we help them think differently about that cost? And so with property values increasing, who determines the value of that? And there are so many people that are determining their own value. I've had so many people that I have approached that says, I don't care how much it appraises for, this is how much I want. And that also plays a critical role around the cost of land, whether there's a structure on it or not. Everybody wants to take advantage and maximize how much they can get for that land and also those units as well. And I think, John, you wanted to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, John, also say something about the opportunity zones and how that might have impacted various neighborhoods where you might be working.
Well, sure. I mean, I think, and this is great, it's coming at the end of what a lot of the other panels have touched on as well. I trust me, I love development. I love the construction that's going on right now, but the continued success of that is largely dependent upon, yes, there's been a lot of great things happening here in Nashville. But if we don't sort of keep our eye on the ball of what sort of made Nashville great and all the hard work that Janet talked about that people have been putting in for decades, the fundamentals there that make people want to move here, which then makes companies want to move here so they can be near those employees, those will start to drift, right? And so you already heard Janet say, we're an affordable place, now we're sort of a semi-affordable place, and that's good. And I don't want to sort of put a rainy, take a negative outlook here and sort of rain on everyone's parade, but we also have to keep our eye on all of these factors that we're talking about here with transportation, with affordable housing, ultimately impact sort of that continued success into the future. And as Marshall said, there is no success in isolation. Just because one person or one sector can do something, it doesn't really work for the rest of Nashville if it's all happening in isolation. So I think there's a way to sort of come together and do what Nashville's always done, sort of show up for Nashville and continue to move in a successful direction.
That's a good segue into how are we building? How do you feel we are building for a more resilient and sustainable future? And I think about resiliency in terms of, we survived a tornado in 2020. We had the bombing downtown that's maybe opened up some thoughts about how to embrace the river. We've endured all the politics on a national level and then sort of politics on the local level. How do you think we're able to build for a resilient and sustainable future? I'll let anybody answer that.
I can take a quick stab at it from a physical building standpoint, I think, and just maybe talk from a construction standpoint. I'm sure, it's no secret that construction prices have gone up lately between the pandemic and just general demand. Janet touched on the price of land and how that affects the the pro forma of a lot of these projects. And so with costs going up, I think there's certainly been a demand for more quality in construction. That also has to do with, how that affects, when you build the project, how does that affect either the employees you're trying to attract or the buyers, the residents, the tenants you're trying to attract. And so I think as we see that happen, we see a sort of a push for more quality, and a better building lasts longer. It's a better investment. It's more sustainable. I think the other aspect of sustainability is, and because of some of the, world events and national events we've seen lately, folks are starting to realize that construction projects don't have to just be a nuisance and something to sort of endure. They can also be a catalyst and a growth opportunity for certain ESG type movements and programs to really kickstart things in a community, whether it's jobs that turn into actual careers, sustainability programs, education programs. And so we're seeing a lot of that also happen in these new construction projects that are coming online, where it's really using not just waiting for the building to be built, but using the construction itself to sort of kickstart the sustainability and the growth in the community.
Yeah. Janet, you might want to say something about the river in your conversation here, because I know we're having big conversations about east and west banks of the river at this point.
Yeah, I think what's going on with the East Bank is pretty extraordinary right now as a city. And what's beautiful about it is, in some ways, it's a blank slate, right? You've got some anchors, you've got the Titan Stadium, you've got Oracle coming, and I would put my hats off to Mayor Cooper's in this office on this. They really want to get it right? So they're putting transit corridors first rather than an afterthought. They're talking about bikeways and greenways first rather than having it be an afterthought. So I think that what's going on with the East Bank is a great example of how we should approach planning as a city in all situations, so that you're not running to catch up, but that you are really getting ahead and saying, let's make this a place people want to be. The other thing I would add on sustainability and resilience, I remember Governor Bredesen used to say, I would like this to be a city that my son wants to come back to with his family and live. So to me, it's about the economy and this being a place that people still love, that they want to come back to, and not just be a flash in the pan, because you can look at it right now and it's a bit frenzy here. And I know that frenzy is a great thing. So I think just continuing and being smart about things, so that when your kids get out of college, they want this to be a place where they want to come back to.
I do love the greenways are coming first with the Oracle and connectivity on the East Bank. There'll be a new pedestrian bridge that connects Oracle's headquarters to the Neuhoff in Germantown. But we're also thinking about a 23-mile loop called the City Central Greenway that has wonderful passes through many underserved urban neighborhoods, with the opportunity to create health and wellness and pocket parks and things in neighborhoods who typically not have the greenways. Not just the green.
Mark, I got to give you a shout out. Mark Deutschman has done more for the Greenway movement in Nashville than probably anybody. I know it's been your passion, and I just would say hats off to you for your dedication to that.
Well, there's a lot more work to go. Thank you, Janet. We've got some really great things in the works, and I can't wait to talk to you guys more about it. And Marshall, how would you wrap this up? What do you think about what we need to do for a sustainable and resilient future for our city?
Well, I think all of you have hit on one common element, and that's about people. And and how do we do development that attracts people, not only people that come here, but also people that want to stay here. And I take my hat off also to the Affordable Housing Task Force that we were a part of in developing a plan of how do we go about doing affordable housing that is all inclusive. And there's one aspect of the guiding principles that was really critical, and that's looking at everything through a racial lens. We have a city that is very diverse, but we have to make sure that everybody is included and development is happening in all parts of the city and in various communities. You talked about the urban communities, and you talk about how do we do development in the North Nashville the same way we're doing it in East Nashville, the same way we're doing it in the South Nashville, we got to make sure that that development is being done where the people are included. And we look at it through a racial lens that is inclusive. That's how we build a resilient, sustainable city, because that's what Nashville has always been, is a city comprised of different populations. And we got to make sure that all populations get good, smart development, and those locations, whether it's greenways in the East Bank, but there's got to be greenways in North Nashville. There's got to be greenways in South Nashville.
They're coming. They're coming.
There it is. So
let's talk
we got to
about it.
look at that type of smart development, whether it's low-income housing tax credits, can't just be on one side of town. They got to be on every side of town, making it affordable and making it all inclusive as well. So I would say that's how we build that and continue the resiliency and also the sustainability of this great city.
Marshall, let's have another walk and talk soon. There's lots to share here.
Absolutely.
I want to thank all of you. You guys are an amazing panel. Janet, thank you so much. John, thank you so much. Marshall, great insights. Wish we had another half an hour, but I think I have to kick it on back.
And if everyone can just hold for a second and smile, we're taking a picture. Perfect.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice.
Thank you, Mark, Janet, Marshall, John. Appreciate you being here. That was a great final panel for today's event. So thank you again for joining us today. Don't forget to stick around also after our next speaker, when our Nashville Executive Director, Shane Collins, will be closing us up today and announcing the results of the polls. I'm honored now to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Dr. Sidney McPhee, President of Middle Tennessee State University. Dr. McPhee is the 10th president of Middle Tennessee State and has overseen one of the strongest periods of growth in the university's century-plus history. Dr. McPhee.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sidney McPhee, president of Middle Tennessee State University. I'm pleased to be a part of this important virtual conference. I know my fellow speakers have made excellent presentations on the numerous business opportunities that exist in the greater Nashville market. As I reviewed the first edition of Invest Nashville and reading about our area's many business assets, it is abundantly clear that we are poised for even greater things in the coming year. As we conclude this informative and productive virtual conference, I will endeavor to make some brief remarks as part of this important event. First, I would be remiss if I did not use this forum to invite you to take a closer look at one of the outstanding universities in our area, Middle Tennessee State University. It will give you a glimpse as to why more college graduates choose MTSU than any other institution in our region. 1 of every 5 Nashville University graduates earn their undergraduate degree from MTSU. We are a driving economic engine and the #1 provider of college graduates to the region's workforce. Our nationally recognized academics, combined with focused degree programs designed to align with the current and future career opportunities for the state and the region. These are only a few of the many reasons why the Princeton Review has included us in their top national list of best colleges for the 3rd consecutive year. The Princeton Review described MTSU as, quote, academic heaven, end of quote, and indicate that the university offers a quality and affordable education. In addition, just a few weeks ago, MTSU was recognized globally by Newsweek magazine as among the best maker school in higher education in 2021. We are located with a short drive from Nashville. MTSU is at the epicenter of our region's historic economic boom. And through our network of 14 Tennessee small business development offices and centers that are located throughout our state, We provide expert business and financial advice to assist and empower small business owners and entrepreneurs. I think it's important to note that approximately 80% of our 130,000 plus alumni live in Tennessee, and more than half right here in the greater Nashville area. As a result, our area alumni generate over $9 billion in business revenue, and their employees generate $6.8 billion here in the Nashville metro market. Our university has an estimated economic impact of more than $1.2 billion on the state's economy. We have tailored many of our academic programs to align with the industry workforce needs in the greater Nashville economy and the state. For example, our world-renowned concrete and construction management industry program is experiencing a talent shortage, with 80% of firms reporting difficulty filling all current openings. This is in addition to expected 10% job growth over the next 7 years. And all you need to do is to look at the Nashville skyline to know that this is true. In addition, our nationally recognized programs in concrete industry management and construction management offers a practical approach to education focused on dynamic industry involvement. Each of our graduates typically choose between an average of 7 job offers. And this fall, we will open a brand new 54,000 square foot building featuring state-of-the-art classrooms, equipments, and our faculty and staff offices and laboratory space. There are many other undergraduate and graduate degree programs at MTSU with similar stories, including our data science, aerospace, mechatronics, and healthcare administration, just to name a few. And our School of Graduate Studies have positioned MTSU as the place to advance your education, becoming Tennessee's fastest growing program. From admissions to program design to advising, we are focused on being accessible and supportive of current and prospective students. We offer flexible and customized plans to fit busy schedules. We also have forged partnerships with several significant Tennessee employers, including Amazon, McDonald's, and Chick-fil-A, to provide educational incentives that help them attract and retain employees in this competitive labor market. So we stand ready to assist our partners in this virtual seminar, as well as the businesses and industries that are inspired to move to Nashville as a result of this new publication. Many thanks to all of you for allowing me to conclude this event and celebrate the premiere of Invest Nashville. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McPhee. We appreciate the comments from Middle Tennessee State University and for him being here today. Again, thank everybody for participating in this event. I'm just waiting. Shane Collins, our Executive Director for Nashville, will be popping up shortly. As soon as he does, I will turn it over to him to turn off the event.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, President McPhee, for taking us out on such a high note and discussing how higher education in Middle Tennessee is preparing the leaders of tomorrow and ensuring the future strength of this great region. We are just so appreciative to have such an incredible group of keynote speakers, panelists, and moderators participate in the first annual Invest Nashville Leadership Summit. For those that I have not yet had the chance to meet, my name is Shane Collins, and I'm the Executive Director of Invest Nashville. I know I speak for my entire team when I say it has been a sincere pleasure to meet and collaborate with the leaders of Middle Tennessee to produce the inaugural edition of our Invest Nashville publication. And a few things stand out about Nashville, really. Across all industries, this market truly embodies the rising tide lifts all boats approach to business and economic development. And I personally was impressed and enthused by not only the warmth and openness with which we were met, but also by this mentality of regionalism that is put into practice in every sector of the community. Like some of our speakers today referenced, despite the challenges of the past 2 years, Middle Tennessee has weathered numerous storms, sometimes literally, and has proven itself as one of the most resilient, dynamic, and diverse markets in the country. Middle Tennessee and Music City really are now on the world stage more than ever, and for more reasons than ever. And I think the 500 plus registered attendees at today's event really show just how impactful business intelligence is as a tool to promote continued growth in the Nashville region. Now I'd like to take a moment to share the results of today's polls, and thank you to everyone who participated. The question in the first poll was, which of the following developments are you most excited about? And the results are, with 59% of the vote, A, Nashville International Airport, specifically B&A Vision. With 36% of the vote, Nashville SC's new MLS Stadium. And with 5% of the vote, Four Seasons Hotel and Private Residences Nashville, all really exciting developments. And for the second question, which of the following is the top priority for your organization in 2022? And the results are, with 41% of the vote, increasing revenues and profits. Getting 29% of the vote is increasing total staff numbers. Getting 20% of the vote is increasing diversity and leadership. We had a great discussion there in multiple panels. And getting 10% of the vote, returning to the office. Thank you again to everyone who participated in the polls. And I'd like to once again thank our incredible partners and sponsors for their support in making today possible. To our gold sponsors, Ascension St. Thomas and Truist. To our silver sponsor, F&M Bank. To our bronze sponsor, the Housing Fund. And to our honorary sponsors, Butler Snow, DPR Construction, and the Surgical Clinic. As a reminder, our team will be sharing a link next week following today's conference so that everyone will have access to the digital edition of the publication. And while this year's Nashville event and publication might be complete, we at Capital Analytics continue to expand our reach year after year. So stay tuned for more news and updates on Nashville and the other markets we cover. And you can register for our newsletters again at capitalanalyticsassociates.com or by writing to contact@capitalaa.com. Thank you again for joining us today, to our virtual attendees, to our sponsors and participants, and to everyone who contributed in making Invest Nashville 2022 such a tremendous success. Thank you and take care.
boy. hands. I can feel my whole world slipping through your hands. I just want you back so bad. There's no point talking about